com to also see I'm not alone. I have with me writer David McGee. He's an award-winning columnist and an author of books, including his new memoir, Dear William, which is what he's here to chat with us about, which was written to his late son who passed away of an accidental drug overdose. And while this topic is heavy, you guys know here on Good Things, we like to celebrate recovery, and there is a recovery twist to it and resiliency. And I think there's some good that can come out of this conversation. So welcome, David.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I know, and we're happy to have you here. I know it's been a whirlwind. Now, when did Dear William first come out?
So, Dear William launched on November 2nd, and Rebecca, we did it on the launch day at the Ford Center on the Ole Miss campus, and it was me and my family on a stage. And we were all together, and we'd all kind of been through this addiction journey together and survived on the other side, minus our late son, William. But it was very special to take that stage together as a family. And then talking about good things, we got to have fun at the end because we had Charles Kelly from Lady A, a friend of mine, play some music for an hour afterwards. So it was a night of celebration in so many respects. So November 2nd, and it's been busy ever since.
It has been busy ever since. You may recognize the name, David McGee, for various different reasons, but you blew up my social media feed from all my friends who are connected with you in the story, who were sharing the CBS Mornings segment that just aired, I think, not too long ago.
Yes.
And then I was like, man, Mississippi really is a small world, how many friends we have connected, but it's also a small world in terms of how many families struggle in silence, whether it's with addiction or sort of their own issues. And I always think it's a good thing to bring those to light. And I want to start with your TED Talk because I was really moved by it. You talk about starting out in Brokenville, but you found your way to Wellbeingville. Felt very, very catchy. Appreciate that. But that's a good place to sort of get an idea of where everything really started to unravel for your family. So where was Brokenville?
First of all, I just have to tell you, Rebecca, the concept of being here on Good News Show, if a decade ago I was at the worst news show, like I was the disaster news, the disaster headline, and I thought about it. It was touching for me walking in to do this show with you because I appreciate so much the stories you bring to light, and it did dawn on me, we've come a long way. So when I was in Brokenville, that was, a couple of years before our son William died of an overdose, before our son Hudson nearly died at a fraternity house of an overdose, before our daughter Mary Hallie was battling eating disorder. It was me, one of the leaders of the family, the father who had fallen to prescription Adderall, and it was given to me by a doctor, and I took it as prescribed. But let me be clear. I did go back to the doctor and talk them into upping the prescription. So I had some culpability in this. I was always afraid of illegal drugs, but a doctor said, you should try this when I was kind of dealing with the things we all go through in midlife. And, man, I took that pill and bam, I was incandescent. And I think I went home and told my wife, well, this is the best drug ever. And I watched over 18 months it eat away at me physically. It ate away at me spiritually because I lost my empathy. I mean, it's speed. There's just no two ways around it. And I ended up, my family was completely broken. I was almost in financial ruin. I was cheating on my wife. I didn't know who I was. And I remember telling my daughter, I don't know if I will ever feel normal again. I'd lost touch with normality.
Which is a scary place to be, very broken. But also you bring it back to a very sort of human experience, which is taking a road trip. With William was still with you. You were headed, I think it was snowing, and you were headed up to Knoxville, Tennessee. I don't even remember what you necessarily were traveling for. But so much was going on. It was sort of setting the stage and foreshadowing maybe the next decade of your life. So for William, who was William then? Or who was William before then?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad you brought up the road trip. What I was doing was running away from myself, and I was running away from home. I had been hosting a small national cable daily television show, the David McGee Show, oddly enough. And I was like, I'm going to go do this in California. So I'm just going to leave my family. My life is so broken. I don't know what else to do. And my wife, who had filed for divorce, just such a loving person, she was concerned about me, and she wanted William to go with me. And William at that time was a college student at Ole Miss, and he was in the honors college, and he'd been on the track team as a sprinter in the 400 hurdles and fluent in Spanish. And But at that time, we were starting to worry that maybe he had a substance issue. So I thought, okay, he was shy and he was more square, but he probably self-medicated to help ease his shyness, right? And she kind of forced him into the car with me to look after me. So I thought, I'll make use of this time. I'm going to lecture William about the virtues of good living as we drive to California. And what happened is we go through this drastic weather, a blizzard, coldest ever temperatures in New Mexico. It was just the craziest experience. Everything I say to William is bouncing back at me, though. And so that by the time I get to New Mexico and it's like 16 degrees below zero and we've been so close in the car, I'm taking a deep look in the mirror at myself. And I realize, oh, I have a problem. And by that point, I'm flushing the prescription Adderall down the toilet and realizing, how can I lecture my son about his illegal drug use when I myself am addicted to legal drugs, and what really is the difference?
Was that really like a aha moment for you, David? Was it a long time sort of coming and feeling? Because I feel like for so many parents, I mean, we talk at our children, not necessarily with our children, and we certainly never look into the mirror and think that maybe some of our issues could be, a reflection of theirs, which I think is a beautiful point in your story altogether with Dear William. But I mean, was it literally, because in my mind, very simple brained, you had like a God moment there in the car and it just a light switched, or was it kind of more of a long feeling coming and you just finally surrendered to what you kind of knew for a while?
Well, I definitely had a faith moment, and it changed my life on the spot. And, I had taught young adult Sunday school classes. I considered myself a believer, but I kept faith and had it in a manly way over on a shelf that I thought I could manage, and really didn't even put it into play. And it wasn't until I had that aha moment and realized I'm just a small man, and who am I to try to overpower the world? And there is a power bigger than me, and it is God, and I have to accept that fully and wholly. And I took that faith magnet and I put it together with belief. And, I found God's grace and forgiveness, and I was able to forgive myself and just free myself of all the pain, and it changed my life in an instant. And, I don't think anybody that knows me would tell you I've never been the same since. And that's kind of funny coming out of my mouth. I'm not really an evangelical type. I'm a man who kind of tries to guard himself a little bit. So I'm just speaking it, though, because it's the truth. I can't really speak anything but that truth because it changed my life.
So I'm curious, did you get back in the car, David, and share with your son, William, that you had flushed your pills down the toilet? Because I feel like I would have been like, look what I did. I flushed them down. Did you call your wife and say, or was it?
Oh, she wasn't ready to take my call yet, let me be honest. But I did celebrate that with William, who celebrated it with me. And it's funny, it allowed us to have this real honest conversation. And I had told him the day before in the car, somewhere in Oklahoma, in the snowstorm when it had snowed a foot and we're getting stuck in the snow. I had told him then, almost in a boastful way, I never did illegal drugs. And I was proud of that. And I think what I said, let me clarify. I said I never did drugs. And he gave me a big smirk. And he's like, what do you call that?
The only way kids can do.
Oh, right. And I'm saying it comes from a doctor. Hello. He's like, but what do you think it is? Do you think there's a difference in that and, say, cocaine, which is a stimulant? And I said, besides the fact that one is legal and one is not, I get your point, And he made a very valuable point, meaning, sure, there are children and adults and people that get it prescribed responsibly, and I'm not here to judge upon that. Let me be clear. I talked a doctor into a higher prescription. He probably should. I will judge him. He shouldn't have given it to me in the first place because I'm not even sure what criteria I fit. But I talked him into giving a higher dose. And I took it as prescribed, mostly because I thought if I took it as it wasn't prescribed, I would use it up by the end of the month, and then I'd be stuck. So I was afraid to misuse it because I was so addicted, and it ruined me. I mean, it just absolutely – I do not wish that on anybody. And I didn't know, Rebecca, if I could get back, honestly.
but you did get back, and there is more to the story, though, bumps and turns along the way for the McGee family, and we'll get to that and more coming up a little more. We're getting more into the topic of Dear William, which is David McGee's memoir. It was written to his late son, who passed away of an accidental drug overdose. And while the topic is heavy, I think the outcome is good.
It has a happy ending.
It has a happy ending, but one thing is that we can connect on, whether you have a family member or a child who has struggled with addiction, or you yourself. We celebrate recovery here all the time, but as parents, I think, and I was reading your story or connecting with it earlier, David, every parent fears losing a child. Whether it's if you
the minute that child is born, that fear begins.
Whether it's a SIDS in the beginning, whether it's an accidental drowning, whether it's a car wreck, whether it's whatever, loss to addiction or any other ailment in between childhood cancer, it is something we can all sort of,
they
be there
take
with
their
you.
first breath in life, and our fear of them losing that breath begins.
And there's so many listening today who have lost children in an untimely way, whether it's through the same avenues or not. The pain is still, it just sucks.
God bless them all, and we all, no matter how we lost our children, we are all part of the same club, and we all share that lingo and language. And there's a truth that only we know. And you can only know by walking in those shoes, and we don't recommend it to anyone.
No, not at all. But we all experience loss as well. But in your story, though, David, you were very open about, you mentioned on the road to Brookhaven, you flushed your pills down the toilet, you made your U-turn. And it feels like you were back on the right track. You're getting everything, back in order, at least trying. And then it feels like the world just sort of hit you with the ultimate whammy, which was losing William.
Then I remember my wife. Her name is Kent. So I remember my wife, Kent, when I'm getting back on my feet and we're getting our relationship back together. And I remember her thinking, this has been so hard. We averted financial ruin. We put our marriage back together. And I remember her saying something to the effect of, certainly the worst is behind us now. And we had no idea, because that's the way life challenges us and tries us, that a lot of times when the storm begins, it keeps coming, because there's so much at the foundation that the termites have eaten away at so much foundation where you think there's sturdiness, there's not. And so what happened is, I was back on my feet. Our marriage was back together. But then where those termites had been eating, then our children's problems began to pour out in heavily. And they had been festering, for lack of a better word, for some time. And, our family just erupted into a volcano of trouble. And our daughter with eating disorder, our son William, who that time is a senior at the University of Mississippi at Ole Miss, graduating. He goes straight into rehab for substance abuse. Our son Hudson, right after the year before that, right after I got back on my feet, he's nearly died. He's found nearly dead, not breathing and no heartbeat on the Ole Miss campus at a fraternity house. And the doctor called me. I was working in New York, but getting back on my feet, and I come out of a meeting and I've got a phone call. And he's like, leaving me messages. He's going to die. And he said if he doesn't die, he's brain dead. He's in a coma, and I've restarted his heart just for you to get down here, and we're probably pulling the plug. And that was before our son William died a year later. And so our family, I remember Hudson miraculously comes back to life, though. And we're just exhaling, and my daughter, Mary Hallie, the youngest, Dad, how did we get so broken? How did we get from that, the smocked outfits on the church pew we felt like we had everything together, and in Christian youth group, and felt like we were doing everything right, but we did so much so wrong?
How did you respond?
Well, at that time, I didn't really know. But what I didn't have all the answers, but what I had was going back to that faith moment 2 years before, or a year and a half before, where I had my aha moment and it changed my life. So when I faced all of this disaster, I was strong enough to handle it. And I was able, with my wife, to lead our family through it. And I was crumbling for nothing before, but now faced with this, with faith, with my two magnets of belief and faith put together for this power. I mean, I could feel the power. And so we were in the crosshairs of disaster and a parent's worst nightmare of losing a child almost and then actually losing one. But faith brought us through it. And I know people didn't give us a chance by that point. They're like, oh, well, he made it through, but this will take them down. But it never came close to taking us down because we had that foundation.
And in fact, it's kind of prophetic. I read where maybe William even asked you to turn y'all's pain into a form of service, which you used that, David, in the best way that you knew how, which is through writing. That's how you made your career, beforehand, or I'm sure you still do to some capacity. Mm-hmm. So how long did it take you to process all that to be able to even consider the memoir, Dear William?
That's a great question. A long time. And in a former life, people would give you descriptions about me, David McGee, and they would probably say something like, he doesn't have much patience. I was not known for my patience. And I'd gone through this life journey and I had really learned. I'm not saying I'm great at it now, but I was like at a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10, or maybe a 2. So maybe I reemerged from this journey at more like a 6 or a 7, maybe a 7.5. And as a writer, after William died, people would say, oh, you should tell that story. And I was like, I might one day. And William told me himself the week before he died to tell our story. But it wasn't time, so I let it percolate for 6 to 7 years. I was still in the middle of my journey. Our family was still in the middle of its journey. And I think that my maturity, both from an emotional intelligence standpoint, was still emerging. And I think to write in a way that people really want to read compellingly, that the writer, if you're going to write about deep family issues, there has to be an empathy and an understanding of others, and a lot of ego has to be erased. And I still was working on erasing a lot of ego. I still got work to do on that, but, I just wasn't – I needed to take the time. In about 2019, I'd finally found who my birth family was. I finally knew my full identity, and I decided, a lot of the work we were doing on the Ole Miss campus and elsewhere to help other students, and I thought, I'm strong, our family is strong, now is the time. And I started writing.
You started writing, and it started touching people in a way I don't know that you were ready for. I mean, every author hopes that their book catches fire, but this is a personal topic to just have to kind of go on that media tour, which is just showing up at your door. It's not necessarily that you had this big great plan for a book launch, and then it's because I think the time is right. I think the timing is right for people who are terrified for their children. When in terms of addiction, the time is right when people are trying to lean into something and bring their suffering to light, but don't know how. And, I just think it was right for the picking for having a book like this. Mm-hmm. And going back to the children, though, I mean, generationally, it just feels like maybe the teens now, and especially the young adults in college, and I wasn't that far away from it, right? Like I'm only 38, but I just feel like it's a different scene, though, for the early 18-year-olds and then, the earlier teens. Do you feel like maybe hindsight you missed something with?
Well, I missed everything.
Well, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. I just mean.
And most parents I know are also missing everything. Hello.
We're relating to our kids' stress these days, I think is where I'm trying to say.
Okay, so you bring up a great point, and this is. I'm going to spin this at the end of this since this is a good news show. So everybody bear with me on this, okay? When I was born in 1965. The average age that teens tried substances was 17 and a half. And so the image that people have of collegiate rite of passage and these innocent children getting to college to experiment, and actually that was real because I think the average age of probably going to college was like 17 and a half. So literally it was right at this doorway when they went off to college. By the time my children were teens, do you know what that age had dropped to?
I don't want to know.
14.
Mine's 9.
14. My son Hudson, and he allows me to say this, he's 10 years sober, so that's some good news.
That is good.
We lost one, folks, but we got a lot to celebrate. He had his first drink in the 5th grade. And he was in youth group all the way through a senior in high school, till high school graduation. And so when it gets down to 14, you get a different picture that their rite of passage is happening in middle school and high school. So that by the time they get to college, a lot of these habits are fully formed, and it's beyond some colleges to be able to fix this. Right. And so things have changed, and we have to address that, and that's the work we're digging in and trying to do.
And y'all are doing that with the William McGee Center for Wellness Education and more at the University of Mississippi. But stick with us. We got more coming up next. We hope you're joining us, too, at supertalktv.com. So you'll see I'm still not alone here in the studio. I got David McGee. He's an award-winning columnist and author. His latest book, a memoir, Dear William, was written about his late son who passed away of an accidental drug overdose. And I hope that you have been as inspired as much as I have about their story of recovery and resiliency. And part of that is you created the William McGee Center for Wellness Education at the University of Mississippi or Ole Miss. So what's going on there? What was the purpose with that?
So the purpose is, in my era when we were growing up, the universities were putting money in what we would call the infirmary. Right, which is now student health services and whatnot. And I think that in the 21st century, universities like Ole Miss recognize that student well-being runs a lot beyond just the sniffles or what you may encounter in a traditional health setting. And so we've worked to put together the William McGee Center for Alcohol and Other Drug and Wellness Education. It's named after our late son. We didn't ask for it to be. That was their idea, and we're so honored to use his legacy to get to help others. But it really just provides a caring support system. It does everything from students can go in for assessment. It can help them think through without what I'll call knee-jerk reactions, like this doesn't go on your academic record. It's separate from, say, the administrative end. It's in a caring environment of being able to really help students think through of where they might need some therapy, where they might need some support. Then once students get that, there's also collegiate recovery programs they can be in where they can be in a safe spot and find support to continue their education. And so, it works closely with the University of Mississippi Counseling Center. We've had just amazing results, and we've been able to see some lives saved and changed already. But that work, Rebecca, is continuing and deepening. Now the College Board and its leadership and the university leadership a couple of years ago created the William McGee Institute also for student well-being. And it's like an umbrella organization, if you will, where the William McGee Center works to serve University of Mississippi students. It's under the umbrella of the William McGee Institute, which allows research and work beyond just campus, kind of in a classic way that a flagship university thrives, like Ole Miss, that's a research school, where it's educating and taking care of its students, but it's also endeavoring to improve life, say, in the state or others. And so the William McGee Institute, I think, gives us some unique opportunities to really work with different partners and create and find solutions that might be things that we could share with other schools, other universities, maybe in the state, maybe other schools well beyond Mississippi. And
so this is definitely not an isolated problem, not in Mississippi, not just at Ole Miss. I mean, campuses all across the United States and beyond, families of all kind. I read where you said we're not anyone special, we're just everybody. And I think maybe not every family has the same, check the box in terms of situations you
did. Of the whole family going down, you mean? Yeah, ours was a little extreme. I do not recommend it.
Well, but I think if you peel back the onion far enough, you probably would find that a lot of families.
Well, that's just the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, because, well, first of all, let me say this, and part of our journey in being able for me to go write such an honest book as Dear William, I had a lot of support from my wife who pushed me to do it. She's normally a shy and quieter person, but she pushed me to go deep. But it's really important for me to say that, we're all in this together, just like you tackling this issue on this show. I had others throughout the state, like a lot of people in Mississippi know members of the Triplet family, and a lot of so Chip Triplet and members of the Triplet family. Now, many of the daughters are my friends and peers, and they're married with different names. But that's just one example where they kind of join with me arm in arm, and they have a family foundation that is kind of help support our efforts as well and put it together. But they also send me these text messages of encouragement on a regular basis. A lot of times it just brings me to tears, and I love them like my own blood. And there's a whole lot of others I can say. I pinpoint them because I want to make a point of it takes a village. And so I can sit here and talk like I'm doing this. The truth is I'm not. There's a village doing this, and maybe I and my family, we're just maybe carrying the flag a little bit, right? But there's a whole lot of people who are really behind this, pushing this ball toward the goal line.
Well, like I mentioned, I think Dear William came at the right time, at a right season where people were ripe and ready to sort of have someone talk about it openly, share what everybody else is sort of struggling with, but then also offer hope. And I think that's what, a lot of the wellness education that you're doing on campuses offers is hope. And then just sharing your own redemptive story, because what other option did you have whether than pull up your bootstraps and try to find a positive way out of it? If not, your whole family would have crashed and sort of burned, and that would have done good for nobody. Speaking of the good things, though, are you surprised by all the good stories that have come from folks reading Dear William? What are some of the biggest surprises you've had?
Okay. Number one biggest surprise, and my face blushes when I say this. People are writing me, and they're strangers, and every morning I get up and I have these long messages of people who found me on social media and stuff, and they're not just saying, and I'm sure this isn't true, they're just telling me, I guess, what do they think I want to hear. I have all these people saying, you don't know me, but this is the best book I've ever read. And I don't just get that once. I show them to other people. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on here, because I can't imagine that's true. And if I got one or two, I'm getting it all the time. And I have to be honest. I'm not sure it's true, and I still don't understand what's happening there, because I don't know. I think that what it is it just, as you said, I did work hard to write a better book than I'd written previous books, but I think that the book just speaks to so many people of where they are, so that maybe that just makes it better. So there are some humbling things going on. Fortunately, when you've crawled across the floor like I have, and everybody else listening who's ever crawled across the floor, once you've had that experience, my ego's still in check. When they tell me that, I'm okay. Like I'm not really thinking I'm, the next whomever writer. I'm just humbled that people are reading it, and it has struck them passionately enough that they want to reach out with such passion. That's what I'm thankful for. But I am surprised by it, honestly, because it's coming pretty hot and heavy.
How does the book read, Dear William? Is it like a letter to William? Is it just your personal story?
And I think that surprises people. Some people see the title of it and they think maybe I've written this letter. What happens is I find him dead. And I was with him the week before, and he told me to tell our story. That's the book you need to write. And I'm like, what? Well, the next week he dies. And I never seen him again. That was the last conversation we had. So I think people think maybe it is a letter to him. What it is I find him dead, and I realize, you know what? This addiction problem and mental health issue and all this in our family, this is intergenerational. I can't just boil this down to my son's death, because I had another one almost die the year before. And I've got a daughter struggling with eating disorder, and I'd lost my marriage and everything I loved over the same thing. And I thought it would be a crime for me as a writer to just write about, our son we lost, without taking a deep, hard look in the mirror. So that's the book I write. So I find him, and then I go back to the beginning. Of my life in Oxford, Mississippi, as an adopted child, adopted by a university professor, adopted out of Sellers Baptist Home in New Orleans. And I didn't know who I was, and most of my life wasn't sure where I was going.
Someone's listening to good things, David. Maybe they need to hear that they should look in the mirror, or maybe they're hearing they should look in the mirror.
Well, I can guarantee you everybody should look in the mirror.
Okay, that's a scary vision for many. What is your pep talk for go ahead and taking the deep dive and doing the personal work? Because that's the work that matters. You can't force that on other people.
When I wrote business books, one of the most valuable lessons I learned is about a culture of blame. And I learned that we tend to want to blame others or find cause, but usually we are the responsible party, and we have to look in the mirror. And it does not feel good at all. But when we go do that work, when we look in the mirror, when we take full responsibility, honestly, that's the first step to being a powerhouse in this life. Once I did that, I found a whole lot of good coming my way because people saw a change in me. I'm going to own it, and I'm going to take full responsibility. People say, well, you didn't have anything to blame for what happened to your family. I go, I don't know about blame, but I have responsibility. I'm their father. Absolutely, I have responsibility. Doesn't mean it might not have happened. All I know is I had responsibility.
Which I feel like we can all find to be a good thing, and we can find our responsibility in our own lives as well as in our children's. Where can we get the book, Dear William?
You can get Dear William at booksellers across Mississippi and anywhere, but I love the ones like Square Books and Lemurie and this new Friendly Books and all of those. It's everywhere, Amazon, everything. Last week, it's been a national bestseller. It almost sold out of stock everywhere, but it's still available. They're restocking. It's back. You can find Dear William.
And
That's
there
right.
you go. Go do it, and it would be a blessing, as this conversation was to me. So I appreciate you taking the time and come joining us in the studio. I feel like you'll be back.
Oh, I'd love to come back. I love your show. I appreciate your optimism, and I appreciate you sharing our story.
And bring the family.
You need to get my wife on here.
I was just thinking minds think alike. But
That was your idea.
That was
not mine.
You guys stick with us. We got a few more good things for you coming up next.